Trout Routes combine stream maps and river data to help you find fishing access faster. Be confident on the water with fishing access points, real-time stream gauges, and public access, now brought to you by Onyx Maps. Whether you're looking for blue lines, gold medal rivers, or something new in your backyard, Trout Routes has the data to get you on the water fast. Destination Angler podcast listeners can try 1 month of Trout Routes Pro for free by clicking on the link in the episode description. Do what I do and put more access in your hands and explore the water you love with Trout Routes today. This week on the Destination Angler.
I'm trying to float all 25 of Alaska's wild and scenic rivers. I've done 10. The Kobuk is by far my favorite so far.
Why is it your favorite? What do you love about it?
The fishing, of course, but just the fact that it starts in the Brooks Range and it's really unique, flows out to Northwest Alaska, and also there's not a lot of human presence along it. So, like I said, floating 7 days, 8 days without seeing anybody. And the sheefish, it's the best place in the world to catch sheefish, and I really value those fish. To me, they're sort of synonymous with wild places. So it's just my jam, I guess, that river.
And that was Kevin Fraley on the Kobuk River in Alaska. Hey, if you like the show, please share it with a buddy. Welcome to the Destination Angler Podcast, the podcast for anglers who travel. And I'm your host, Steve Haigh. We go right to the source, the local guides and experts, to build your knowledge of top fishing locations around North America. It's a big world out there. Now go and fish it.
I'm going away for a while, but I'll be back soon. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Hey anglers, welcome back to another episode of the Destination Angler, brought to you by High and Dry Fishing, where science and performance meet. By Got Fishing, crafting world-class fly fishing adventures specially designed to your level of experience and budget. And by Trout Routes. And today our destination is Alaska's remote Brooks Range with fisheries ecologist Kevin Fraley. We explore this wild landscape, Arctic species like Dolly Varden and Sheefish, and the conservation fight over the Ambler Road project. Kevin shares some wild adventures of bear charges, moose encounters, a 2-week solo packrafting trip, and scenery so pristine it even smells that way. So grab your bear spray and your sat phone as we head into the wilderness with Kevin. Well, some of you folks have been asking for some remote destinations, and man, let me tell you, we got remote today. Our destination is the land of the midnight sun. This is the ancient Brooks Range in northern Alaska. And I'm telling you, I feel like we're going to the moon, man. It's like mythical. It's otherworldly where we're headed. And today we've got Kevin Fraley, who lives in the area. He lives from Fairbanks. Kevin's going to join us for the show. Welcome to the show, Kevin.
Thanks so much for having me on, Steve. I've been really enjoying your podcast and really excited to talk with you today.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. So anyway, this is a vast, largely roadless mountain range, stretches over 700 miles east to west. And it is quite possibly the purest, most remote fly fishing destination in America. Much of it lies within the gates of the Arctic National Park. Ever heard of it? I had not. It's the least visited park in the United States. Does that sound about right, Kevin?
Yeah, I'd say so. It's a lot of our parks in Alaska are pretty inaccessible, and that's a difficult one to get to for sure.
Yeah. Is there even a road that goes to it?
You can get close with the Dalton Highway within a few miles, but there's no established trails to get there and no roads that actually go into the park.
Okay. Just sort of exists then for our enjoyment,
Yeah, that's right.
All right. So the northern slope of the Brooks Range, it's tundra and it's the Arctic Circle. On the southern end, it's the boreal forest of central Alaska, home of caribou herds, moose, grizzly, black bears, wolves, Dall sheep, musk ox, migratory birds. But you know what, folks? This is too far north for trout. Yes, that's right. Instead, you will find Arctic char, Dolly Varden, salmon, grayling, and the tarpon of the north, sheefish. Say that 6 times fast. Trogdaria. And these are found largely in untouched river systems. Did I get that right, Kevin?
That's absolutely right. Those are our main fish species that we like to go after up there. So they're very special.
Yeah, man, I've seen some pictures of some really big Arctic char from the north side of the Brooks Range. They get, how big do they get?
Well, we have Arctic char and Dolly Varden. They're very similar species, but they live in different habitats. So the Arctic char are in lakes up there on the North Slope, and then the Dolly Varden are in the rivers. And those riverine Dolly Varden can get up to 20 pounds or so.
20.
Yeah, especially in rivers like the Woolik, which is more in northwestern Alaska, or the Ivashak, which is one of our wild and scenic rivers on the North Slope up there along the Dalton Highway. So, yeah, they're pretty incredible fish, beautiful colors, really hard fighters, and hopefully we can talk more about them today. So.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So finding Kevin was a real stroke of luck here because Kevin is a fisheries ecologist with the Wildlife Conservation Society. Now, who is that exactly? What is that?
Yeah, so it's we'll just call it WCS for short. It started out in 1895 as the New York Zoological Society. Started out sort of with the Bronx Zoo and the New York Aquarium, and it's now branched out into this big global conservation nonprofit organization with the goals to protect wild places and wildlife through research, through outreach, not a bunch of litigation like some more I guess outdoor environmental groups.
Sure.
So we're sort of a research nonprofit. Employ a lot of scientists. In my small office in Fairbanks, we have bird biologists, a couple of social scientists. I'm the fish biologist, and we also have like some wildlife veterinary staff type thing. So pretty small group in Fairbanks, but offices around the world.
How about that? And was Teddy Roosevelt involved somehow in this?
That's right. Yeah, he helped, I guess, found the charter for the organization back in 1895, or he helped in some way to get that started.
So Kevin is a fly fisher, a hunter, a pack rafter, of course, a fish ecologist. He's got a PhD, guys. He lives in Fairbanks. He's been there since 2008. He's written a bunch of outdoor adventure and conservation articles for Fly Fish Journal, The Drake, Trout Unlimited, Backcountry Journal, and the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership. He's up in the Brooks Range on a regular basis in Alaska's Arctic slope to fish, hunt, pack raft, and study the unique aquatic environments of these areas, I'll say. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So, what is life like in Fairbanks? That's pretty far north, just in and of itself.
Yeah, Fairbanks, we don't have a lot of mountains around us. It's kind of flat. It's really cold, obviously. We famously get down to -40 Fahrenheit in the winter, and the university there,
Jeez.
they have the -40 club where students pose like in their underwear by the temperature sign when it hits -40.
Okay.
It's a town of we got like about 100,000 people in the sort of the greater area, and it's the best place for jumping off to get up to the Brooks Range, mainly up the Dalton Highway, which is the only road in Alaska that goes across the Arctic Circle and all the way up to the Arctic Ocean, and it ends in the Prudhoe Bay oil fields, where all the oil comes from and
Sure.
funds a lot of what we do in Alaska. But yeah, Fairbanks itself, it reminds me of Great Falls, Montana, near where I grew up, where it's sort of more of an industrial town, not like super pretty or a destination itself, but it's a great central location to go out and do things in the outdoors.
Is there farming up there in this part of Alaska?
Not very much, very little. So there's about 100 miles southeast of Fairbanks. There's this little town called Delta Junction where they do grow some barley, and they have like free range bison and deer and cattle and that sort of thing. So there's not a whole lot of agricultural production. You can find just a few sort of locally produced things like that in the stores, but yeah, most everything as far as our agriculture and stuff is brought into Alaska.
Huh. Because I've seen pictures of some of the vegetables that are grown in Alaska, and they're like
That's
5
true.
times as big as down here.
Yeah, that's true. The Alaska State Fair, they every year they have these gigantic pumpkins, and it's because the growing season is fairly short, but it's 24 hours of light in some
Right.
places. So the certain things can grow really fast, but it's hard to do that at scale to produce food for people just because the soil is not super rich and that sort of thing. And yeah, it's so most everything gets imported in, but we do have those giant vegetables.
How big? Give me an idea of how big their vegetables get. Like, how big's a big pumpkin?
They're several hundred pounds, I think, and it's not
Really?
like the world record. The world record is from somewhere else. I think maybe the Midwest states or something. I'd have to look, but the ones from Alaska get pretty close. Those pumpkins, and then these huge like cabbages and lettuces too. But yeah,
Right.
several
I've
hundred
heard.
pounds for sure.
So kids could carve a pumpkin for Halloween and play in the pumpkin at the
Yeah,
same time.
totally.
If they could get it home, that would be the hard part.
Yeah, they have to put them on. they have to put them on big trailers, to take them to the fair to show them off. So
Do
they're
they?
not too
Yeah.
easy to move around.
Oh my gosh. Now, how much sunlight are you getting up there right now? I know today you're actually in Chile. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. So right now we're losing daylight fast in Fairbanks, up where I usually am based. So yeah, as we get closer towards into winter, it gets very dark and cold up there. Like the darkest part of winter, we're getting maybe 4 hours of daylight during the day. So kind of going to work in the dark and coming home in the dark, which isn't very fun.
Yeah.
But then, the opposite in the summer, we have, it never gets dark in Fairbanks during summer solstice. You can stay up all night. There's the Midnight Sun baseball game that people go to at 11 p.m. where it's still light out, and Midnight Sun Run, which is a 10K that starts at like 10 p.m. So it's a land of extremes. People kind of hibernate as it gets into winter. And then in the summer, it's like, you get out there and go until you die. So.
That's amazing. All right, so let's talk about the Brooks Range. So what is the allure of the Brooks Range? I mean, for you personally, what is it that just makes you come back there again and again, besides your work, obviously?
Yeah, well, it started pretty young for me. I grew up down in Northwest Montana, and my dad would read me these books that Bob Marshall wrote, who was a wilderness pioneer, and there's a wilderness area named after him in Montana there. He wrote a couple books, one called Alaska Wilderness, where he went up into the Brooks Range in the 1920s, 1930s, and explored these areas that were still basically completely unmapped for Europeans. So he went up this little town of Wiseman. He flew in there, some of the first bush flights to get in there. And then he would go up on horseback or by boat or by foot up into these drainages, and he was naming peaks and seeing places that probably no white man had seen before him. And so reading that book just got me so excited about these places. And Alaska was always a destination for me because I love fishing and hunting. I've been reading about fish like the sheefish, which you can find only in a few other places in the world. And so definitely a mythical place, and it all lined up to get up there. And as soon as I did arrive in Fairbanks, I didn't have a big budget as a college student, but some of my first trips were driving up the Dalton Highway to go caribou hunting, to catch Arctic grayling up there, and to hike out and catch those Dolly Varden char as they swim up the rivers there. It took a while before I got up to the Kobuk, which we're going to be talking a bit about today, just because it's a little bit harder to access that and a little more expensive. But I jumped right into it, and man, it's my favorite place in the world, the Brooks Range there. Just
Really?
I could talk about the beauty of it and the different landscapes and the scenery for hours if you'd let me to, but I can paint a quick picture if you want me to. So
yeah, I'd love to hear what it looks like.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I think the best way to see it is to drive that Dalton Highway. So you start down in the south, and you're working your way north, and you're kind of moving into these different ecoregions. And if you go in August, you're getting all these autumn colors. So as you head north, you're going through the spruce forest as you leave Fairbanks, and about 200 miles north, you start getting into the foothills of the Brooks Range near this little town called Coldfoot, which is sort of a glorified truck stop. And then from there, you're basically enveloped by the Brooks Range, and you got, in the autumn time, you got this blood red tundra. You got the yellow of the willow leaves there, this dark green of the spruce trees, and then sort of this slate gray of the mountains, which you talked about are pretty old. So there's sort of crumbly, light gray color, not super craggy or tall, but just sort of these really neat geologically old mountains. And you can see little Dall sheep up there, little white dots, start getting into caribou. Then you actually leave the spruce behind. So after you pass Coldfoot, you go up over this big pass called Adigan Pass, up over the Arctic Divide. And from then, everything that's flowing with you water-wise is going into the Arctic Ocean. And you come out there, and there's muskoxen, caribou, this big, wide, open coastal plain. It looks otherworldly out there, just little tiny willow brush, none of those spruce trees. So it's quite a transition from Fairbanks all the way up there. And just so much wildlife. Like I mentioned, those caribou, muskoxen, Dall sheep, all the fishing. So, yeah, it's like a feast for the eyes.
Yeah. So you can see the grizzly bears coming at you from a long way away on the other side on the north side of the Brooks Range, huh?
That is true. Yeah, I was up there, like I guess it was mid-August, and I did a hike in to go fish for those Dolly Varden, and you can see those grizz way out on the tundra, just sort of going along. At that time in August, they're really bulking up, before the winter season. So you can just see them a long ways off, sort of digging after ground squirrels, eating berries. It's just kind of cool to see them way off there. And it's a good thing, too. You don't want to surprise them up close.
Yeah, I'll say. So have you had some encounters with some bears? I mean, you've seen them, but anything that scared the bejesus out of you? Yeah, I wanted to jump in here for just a second. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you can catch all the Destination Angler podcasts. We have some great shows coming your way, like the Upper Delaware River, Rangeley, Maine brook trout, and the Blue Ridge Mountains. And be sure to backcast to catch the last episode on New Zealand.
Yeah, last year I had, well, normally or in the past, I never have had like a difficult encounter, but the last couple of years, there's been a couple instances, one on the Kobuk where we were camping on this little island. It was only about big enough for 2 tents, and we were going to get picked up by our float plane the next day. And all of a sudden we heard this huffing in the brush. I mean, it was maybe 100 yards to the main bank. And this bear comes out, and I think he could smell. We had some sheefish samples because this was a work trip. So we had some mussel samples that we were going to test for contaminants in a cooler, and he could smell that. So he was kind of moving around on the bank, and then he actually started swimming out towards us. And we were on this tiny little island with just us and our 2 tents.
Not good.
That was not going to fly. So we started throwing rocks at him and saying, get the heck out of here. And he thought better of it and went back. But we didn't get very good sleep that night because we figured he was probably just lurking over there on the bank, like 100 yards away, waiting for his moment.
Yeah, what's that like? What's that like? Like trying to sleep. I mean, we're trying to sleep and you got a bear that's hanging around. That can't feel good.
The good thing is we'd be able to hear him because if he was swimming, he'd be making all sorts of noises, splashing around, So, but we definitely slept lightly that night. And then last year I was doing a pack raft trip. So I hiked 60 miles into the headwaters of the Ivishak River, which is one of our wild and scenic rivers in Alaska. And I was starting to pack raft about 80 miles to get back to the Dalton Highway. And I was just walking along with my pack raft because the water was too shallow to actually float with me in it. And a bear must have heard me because he came busting out of the willows, running, like sprinting towards me at 50 yards away.
Ooh.
I think he thought I was a caribou because I was walking around through the gravel, making some splashing noises. Once he saw I was a human, he like spun around and then he ran off, and I could see him running for like 2 miles through the tundra way off in the distance. So
really,
once he figured out what I was, he quickly whipped around. But I had a handgun here, my bear spray in the other hand, so I was ready.
Oh my gosh!
But it was definitely a scary moment. I had to sit down for a second there and calm down after that.
Yeah, my goodness. Was this one of these Alaskan brown bears, or what kind of grizzlies are they?
Yeah. So that was on the north side of the Brooks Range, and so that's grizzly bears, we call them, but they're the same species as brown bears too. But the ones near the coast we call brown bears.
Do they get as big as those coastal?
No, so the biggest ones are on Kodiak Island just because they can eat salmon and deer almost year round. The ones in the Brooks Range are usually pretty small, so kind of smaller grizz, and they can be aggressive because they just need to be. Like they live in an environment that doesn't have a lot of food. There's not a lot there, and they have a short time to kind of bulk up before the winter. So they are known to be small, but sometimes aggressive towards humans. Luckily, I've never had one where I felt I was actually threatened. Just that sort of bluff charge where he spun around once he figured out what I was.
You didn't feel threatened when he bluff charged you?
I don't know. I guess I did. Yeah.
I would have felt
if I had my hand on the gun, then I was.
You got to shoot straight. Have you ever had to shoot at a bear?
Well, I've harvested a few bears in this area of Alaska. You're allowed to take 1 grizzly per year as a resident, and then also 3 black bears per year. So wow. I go out and hunt for black bear almost every year. Usually get one, and then I have harvested 1 grizz in the past, but they don't taste as good as the black bears do. So I've only just taken the 1. But that is one reason why some of these bears are, they do have a good behavior around humans sometimes because they do know that they can be hunted. So they're not going to be too bold, like maybe some bears on Kodiak Island where they try to steal deer from hunters and that sort of thing. So,
wow. Yeah. Even in a remote place like the Brooks Range, you feel like they've seen enough people where they know, I need to get the fire truck out of here.
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, where I was, it was close enough to the Dalton Highway and on the Ivishak River, so they probably have seen a number of people. But if you got farther out there away from people, you're right. They probably would never have seen a human before, and it might have been a different story.
Huh. I first came across liquid fly dip floatants years ago when guides were mixing their own brews with lighter fluid and mucilin wax. It worked, but you had to wonder, what's it doing to the river? Recently, I tried some store-bought brands. One left a white crust on my fly, another left an oil slick in the water. Not good. No way I'm using that stuff. Then I found High and Dry, and let me tell you, this stuff is a game changer. It's built by scientists who actually fly fish, and it shows. Your fly floats like a cork, looks natural, and it's 100% environmentally friendly. No film, no gunk, no guilt. And their floatants work in any condition, from blazing heat to freezing cold. In my opinion, these are the best performing, most innovative floatants on the market today, hands down. So check out the full lineup of liquid floatants, line dressings, and cider waxes at highanddryfishingproducts.com. Your fly and the fish will thank you. Here's Brian Oakland, founder of Got Fishing.
There's really no reason for an angler not to use Got Fishing when everything we do for you is free. We have the best trips around the world. We only work with the best outfitters, and we're definitely going to get you the best deal and the best dates guaranteed. That's why we have clients come back time and time again. We have Don with us on this trip. This has been his 6th fishing adventure with Got Fishing, and I think if you asked him, it is because of all the little things. We don't tell people, we ask questions. What is it that you're looking for? What would be most important to you? Who's coming with you? What's your experience level? And really at the end of the day, what is the most important aspect of this experience that you're looking to take home? And then from there, we just marry them up with some of the best lodges, let them take a look at 2 or 3 different options and pick what's going to be best for them.
Well, there you have it, folks. A pretty good case for choosing Got Fishing for your next big adventure. So what are you waiting for? Give Brian a shout or visit gotfishing.com. Now, if you have to shoot a bear in self-defense, what happens to you? Is there a lot of paperwork involved?
Yeah, you know, if you're on a trip where you're trying to go somewhere, you basically have to stop and use your satellite communicator to get a hold of the Alaska State Wildlife Troopers and stay there while they come and investigate. And you're required to actually skin out the bear and like take care of it like you would if you had harvested as on a hunt, but you don't get to keep the hide or anything like that. And you have to definitely fill out some paperwork so it can disrupt your plan of travel, that sort of thing, because it has to be investigated to make sure you were within your, I guess, rights of doing that in defense of life and property, we call it. But, you know, if you can just put your hunting tag on it, then it makes it a lot easier, I guess. So, and actually, the Grizzlies, for residents up there, you don't even need a permit. You can harvest your 1 bear per year without even holding like a tag. You have to fill out the date or anything. So,
yeah.
But yeah, it's different for non-residents or somebody that doesn't have a hunting license. You definitely don't want to have to do that. That's why I do like to carry bear spray and have that as a first line of defense, because I'd rather not kill a bear. I'd rather not have to deal with all that hassle. And you know, if you do bear spray a bear, that's I guess teaching it a good thing. You know, the humans run away, get away from them. They're like something you shouldn't mess with. So.
No. So have you had to spray some bears?
Never had to. No.
How about that?
Yeah, you know, I don't know. Maybe I'm just too loud, so the bears always hear me coming. A lot of people have trouble when the bears, when they sneak up on a bear, like hunters that are trying to be really quiet, and they come up close to a bear without the bear realizing it until the bear feels threatened and then attacks defensively.
Yeah.
So that's it's just been, I guess, luck for me, and maybe a bit of just self-awareness, kind of always keeping my eyes out that I haven't had to shoot or pepper spray a bear that I wasn't intending to shoot. So.
Yeah. You know, when I was researching the Brooks Range to get ready for the show, something I came across that was really interesting is that what it smells like up there. Does that ring a bell? I've heard it smells just really wonderful, like different though. What do you think?
Yeah. There's this plant on the tundra up there called Labrador tea, and it has this really fragrant, nice, it's not quite like sage, but it's like tea sort of smell, and that's carpeting most of the tundra up there. So when you step on it, you're kind of crushing the leaves and you get that scent coming up. So yeah, I agree. If you're plodding around out there on the tundra, you kind of get that nice fresh smell from the Labrador tea.
What about on the other side where there's the forest?
There too, it's the same plant, and then also the spruce is very fragrant as well. So that always adds a nice smell. Yeah, it's the air is so fresh out there. It's nice, and nothing smells too bad, unless you're right close to the road where there's a bunch of exhaust fumes or something from all the trucks.
Do you do this? Do you go up there by yourself quite a bit?
I've ended up doing that the last few years, especially now that it's easier with the satellite communicators to keep in touch with people with inReaches and stuff. But for work, I'm always with at least one other person. And, ideally, I think it's always great to have one other person or more, just because there's more safety in numbers for bear protection, as well. If something happens to one member of the party, there's a better chance of getting extracted with a good outcome. So, I end up doing some solo trips because people are so busy the time of year I want to do it. August and September, everybody's got their own hunting or fishing scheme, and nobody wants to go with me for 10 days, 15 days to do these things because they have their own plans. So.
15 days. Have you done 15 days by yourself up there?
Yeah, last year on that Ivishak trip, I guess it was 13 days out in the, hiking, and then, several days up and down the road too. So, and I actually
Wow.
cut that short. It was going to be almost like 18 days, but I shortened the trip a little bit. So, of course, when you're doing that, it's hard to plan for all the food and stuff, and you have a really heavy pack. That's kind of at the limits of what you want to be doing. But.
Yeah, right. So are there people that live in the Brooks Range, some natives, or what do you see?
Yes. So there's two sort of groups of Alaska Native people that live up there. So there's Inupiaq people, which are like the people of the coast. Traditionally, a lot of whale hunting, seal hunting, living along the
Sure.
coast that would come up into the Brooks Range, and they still live there too. There's a village called Anaktuvik Pass that's right on the Arctic Divide. It's a little bit to the west of the Dalton Highway where it crosses. And people live there year round, like right up there in that pass. Those are Inupiaq people. And then just on the southern side of the Brooks Range, there's a lot of Koyukon Athabascan people, which are more people of the interior Alaska. And so there's many villages down there that are still, the culture's thriving. There's Alakakit, Alatna, Bettles, Huslia. And then as you get on the Kobuk River, if you get farther out west, you get back into Inupiaq territory. There's sort of an interface there where it's kind of cool. There's some creeks that have an Athabascan name, and they also have an Inupiaq name because both peoples utilize that area at different times.
Huh. What are they like? Friendly people?
Yeah. I haven't spent as much time with Athabascan people, but I work out with Alaska Native folks out in Kotzebue, Alaska, which is along the coast there, Inupiaq people, and just amazingly friendly folks, super knowledgeable, super skilled out on the water and the land. And we actually work with the native village of Kotzebue, the Wildlife Conservation Society, to do our fishery work. And so our partners there are just awesome at kind of reining us in sometimes, making sure we're engaging with the community in a good way and not, sometimes the scientists are just coming in and bombarding with too much questions and too much, I don't know, sometimes people can be overwhelmed. So just telling us like, hey, dial it back a little bit, or let's do this instead. And it's super helpful and great to have those local partners to do that.
Huh. Are they like politically aware, for instance, or are they just very focused on their world up there?
No, so the Alaska Native people are super plugged into the politics. So there's the Alaska Federation of Natives, which is this big gathering where a lot of Native people from all over Alaska come once a year, and they talk about shared goals and initiatives and that sort of thing. So they're very politically vocal and, obviously drive a lot of what happens in the state. So.
Huh. No kidding. That's fascinating. So how good's the fishing? I imagine it's pretty spectacular with so few people up there.
Yeah, it depends on where you go. Obviously, if you're flying out or hiking out in the brooks there, the further you get away from the road and the villages and that sort of thing, the more, you might not see people for 7 or 8 days, like the first Kobuk River float trip that I went on. We floated 120 miles of the Kobuk River, and we only saw people, the last 2 days that were coming up from villages in their boats and that sort of thing. So you feel like you're totally out there in the middle of nowhere, and like reading Bob Marshall's books from the 20s and 30s, it seems just as wild and just as, I guess, amazing for the fish and wildlife populations as back when he was describing it, almost 100 years ago. So
that's cool.
And yeah, the fishing, these places are tough to find the fish because these fish are moving a lot seasonally, especially the sheefish and the Dolly Varden. They're moving up the river to spawn, then they're going back out in the ocean for the rest of the season. So the fall time, August and September, is when those dollies and sheefish are coming in to spawn, and you sort of intercept them on their way. Once you find them, then the fishing is off the hook, as long as the weather lines up, which can always be a problem. If the river's blown out and there's too much mud or high water, you might have a little more trouble finding the fish. But if you can find them and the conditions are decent, man, it's just incredible fishing. The huge fish and also as many as you want to catch. Sometimes you just have to rein yourself in a little bit and let your arm have a rest.
Is that right? Your arm gets tired, huh?
Yeah, mine did on the Kobuk River trip for sheefish, because you're catching like 5 to 20 pound fish on almost every cast. After like maybe an hour of that, I was like, okay, maybe I'm being a little greedy, and also my arm really hurts. So I'm going to go, have a campfire and have some lunch and a shot of whiskey or something and relax for a bit instead of hammering multiple fish.
So there's room for a bottle of whiskey on these trips.
Yeah, I always bring Fireball because it's almost always wet and cold, and that really is like a cold weather.
Warms you up.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So what are the main species? We've kind of been ticking them off, and I listed them at the beginning, but what do you like to fish for?
My two favorite ones up there are sheefish, which are only found in Alaska, Canada, and Russia. And they're only found in a few places in Alaska. So they just are really special to me because you can't find them very often. It took me like 10 years of living in Alaska before I caught my first sheefish, and it was on the
Really?
Kobuk River float.
Huh.
And then, the Dolly Varden are the other really awesome ones just because of the colors they get. They have this like bright orange belly, these white edged fins, sort
Huh.
of this green and blue body when they're in their spawning coloration in the fall. In the summertime, they're just
Cool.
sort of silvery gray, but when they're in the fall time, they just have this incredible coloration, like a brook trout on steroids,
Yeah.
up to 20 pounds. So those two are definitely my top favorite fish. And we can talk more about the sheefish in particular too, if we're going to dive in on the cobra.
Yeah. All right. Just a little more on the Dolly Varden. So when a Dolly Varden gets big and colored up in the fall, I mean, what's the fight like with one of those guys?
They're really strong. They're not going to leap in the air, but they're in the same genus of fish as like bull trout, lake trout, Arctic char. All those fish are really strong. They're not going to, they're going to pull out some line for sure if you hook a good one. They're going to fight for a while. They're not like a northern pike where you have one run for 30 seconds and
Right.
then you just bring them in like a
Reel 'em
sawed
in.
and log.
Yeah.
These char will put up a heck of a fight because they're in really good condition. They've just come from the ocean from a summer of
Huh.
feeding there, so they're really strong, really fat, and they will give you 5 to 10 minute fight, a really large one, especially
Really?
in a bigger river where they can use the current. Some of the rivers that I fish in are so small you can sort of just pace along with them up and down the gravel bars and sort of get them in without tiring them too much. But yeah, they're
Yeah.
strong fish and really fun to catch.
How are you going after them? Are you using a fly rod?
Yeah, with them always I'm doing a fly rod because it's when I'm fishing for them, it's like crystal clear water, so it's sight fishing. And what I
Oh,
like to
cool.
do is I'm going up these big braided rivers and I look for actually seagulls. The seagulls like to hang out where these big groups of dollies are sort of staging before they go to spawn. So if I see a group of seagulls, I'll spend a little time fishing in there. And then you can usually see the males because they have that bright red belly. So once you start sort of your fish vision tuned in, and if the water's nice and clear, you can start to see them. And then I always work my way up from the bottom of the pod of fish so I can sort of like
Yeah.
catch a few from the lower end and bring them downstream so that I don't spook ones that are further up because they are a little spooky in that really clear, shallow
Yeah, I
water. So
bet.
if you want to catch, 5 or 6 out of a hole, you kind of have to go about it that way instead of just charging in there.
What kind of flies you're throwing?
For them, I really like sort of articulated rabbit leeches, black and purple
Yeah.
especially. It shows up really well in that water. They're very aggressive fish, and they'll give you, usually a couple tries. Even if they do feel hook, they have a really hard beak. It's almost like a salmon at that time. Their body has changed for the spawning. So they have this really hard jaw. So even if the hook gets in at them a little bit, they don't seem to notice it, and they'll bite a couple times, or
Really?
maybe they just don't care. I don't know, but yeah, usually they'll give you a couple chances.
So they're feeders when they come in?
They are not. So that they're sort of like salmon, but they can spawn multiple times. They don't die, after spawning one time. So when they're coming into freshwater, they're supposedly not feeding much, though some people say that occasionally they'll catch one with a few things in its stomach. So it's more territorial or reflexive biting after these streamers.
They are. Okay. Huh. So
Yeah.
you're fishing down and across?
Well, I lived in New Zealand for a few years, and so I kind of do the same thing I did there, where you start downstream and you keep kind of low, and you're casting upstream into the pool
Oh.
so that you're not spooking the fish. So, trying to stay downstream as much as possible, and
With a streamer, you're casting upstream.
yeah, and then stripping real fast, and they'll go way out of the
Okay.
way to get it. So
Do they like them when they swing and kind of stop as like a fish would, or?
they absolutely do, but then you're exposing yourself a little more to their vision. So if you're on like a bigger river, like the Ivashak or something, that works great because there's a little more space to do that, and they don't feel like they're as vulnerable as when they're in a very small creek
Interesting.
like they sometimes are. So
Yeah, that's super cool. Okay. And we are going to get to the Kobuk, but I wanted to also ask you about sheefish. So fill us in for those guys that have never heard of a sheefish. And if I hadn't been doing this podcast for 5 years, I would have been one of those guys who would have never heard of one of these. So what is a sheefish?
yeah, so they're a really unique fish. Like I said, only found in a few places in the world in the north, and they're actually a member of the whitefish family. So like where I grew up in Montana, we had Rocky Mountain whitefish. Over in the Great Lakes, there's sort of whitefish like Lee Cisco and lake whitefish and that sort of thing. So these are related to those fish. They're just much bigger, and they have a big bass-like mouth. And they are called tarpon of the north because they do look a bit like a tarpon. They're sort of real silvery. They got large scales, this big bucket-like mouth, and they don't leap as much as a tarpon does, but they're really strong fighters too. And so these whitefish are different because they're actually predators. So unlike the Rocky Mountain whitefish, which are just sipping little bugs and down in the mud and that sort of thing, these sheefish are going after other fish like Arctic grayling, smaller whitefish, even frogs, voles, whatever they can get after. They're very aggressive fish. They have that big mouth, so they'll try to get anything. And I've even caught a few with like a little chunk of wood or a rock in their mouth. So
Oh, in their really? Okay.
or in their stomach. Once in a while we'll keep
Yeah.
one and fillet one up, and I always check the stomachs of fish because you never know what you're going to find in there. Sometimes some
Yeah.
crazy stuff.
Toilet seats, old shoe.
Yeah. I once caught a cutthroat trout that had 2 salamanders in its stomach. That was super cool. So,
Yeah.
and of
Who
course,
knew?
pike, you never know what you're going to get in their stomach. Some really wild stuff like a whole muskrat
Right.
or a frog or a vole. But yeah. And so these sheepish, they can live for older than me. I'm 35. They've been documented to live to 39 years old. They get up to 50 pounds. The state of Alaska and the world record is, I think, 52 pounds or something from the Kobuk. And so the Kobuk River is the best place in the world, I'd say, to go catch those sheefish just because of the size and the abundance of those fish. So just like the Dolly Varden we talked about, they're coming up into the rivers in the fall to spawn, and they're not really eating too much. So again, they're sort of territorially biting, but you find these pods of like hundreds and thousands of these fish on the Kobuk.
Thousands, literally thousands.
Yeah, thousands of them, because they're all spawning in this sort of like few, maybe 20-mile stretch of the main stem of the Kobuk. So they're really concentrated in there, and the population is considered to be in the tens of thousands in the region. And during the summertime, they typically go out to the coast, and they're out there sort of feeding along the sort of the brackish areas. They don't go out into full saltwater much, but they go out there along the coast. So that's sort of, a bit of their life history in a nutshell. I probably missed a bunch of stuff, but we can talk more about it.
Interesting. And so the Kobuk, does that dump into the Yukon or does that go right into a bay in Alaska?
Yeah, the Kobuk is unique because it actually goes out into the Chukchi Sea near Kotzebue Sound, so right near the village of Kotzebue on the Chukchi Sea coast, whereas most of the other streams in the Brooks Range are flowing, like you mentioned, down into the Yukon drainage or up north into the Arctic Ocean. So it's just the Kobuk and the Noatak River that basically flow out of the Brooks Range, but out into northwest Alaska into the Chukchi Sea.
Okay. So you like to target them in the fall then? That's your favorite time of year?
Yeah, for sure. That's when you're most likely to find them. I've caught them, other times of the year as well, and even through the ice out in Kotzebue in the springtime, which is fun. They're chasing around herring and smelt in the brackish waters there. But yeah, the best time to find them is in the fall when they're kind of working their way up towards their spawning grounds. They spawn late September, early October. So I like to go late August, early September, sort of before they're really getting into their spawning. And once you find those areas where they're hanging out, then it's lights out. You can catch as many as you want. The state of Alaska recommends maybe take it easy on them, like catch 12 of them and give them a break because it does stress them out a little bit, a lot of catch and release. And they're incredibly good eating too, really nice white meat, tastes like halibut or cod almost. So when you're floating the Kobuk, it's a great thing to catch like a smaller one. You don't want a big one unless you got a party of like 10 people because it's almost too much meat to eat out there on the shore. So
Right. That's cool. All right. So where do you find them then is when you're fishing for them? Like what are their habits?
yeah, so when they're coming up the rivers, you kind of want to look for sort of deep runs and deep holes, and there's this known sort of spawning area. It's right by the Paw River where it goes into the Kobuk, for the Kobuk in particular. There's just a few other rivers in Alaska that do have sheefish or drainages, so it's the Yukon, Kuskokwim, and the Selawik, but the Kobuk is the best place to go. There's sort of it's like along near that Paw River, and so what we have done is we sort of prospect for the fish by casting big spoons with a spinning rod as we float down the river in a raft. And once we start hooking them, then we know we're in the zone. So then we pull over, get out the fly rods, and start in earnest there. But you can go through these long stretches of the river where there's no fish or no sheefish. Plenty of grayling and chum salmon and that sort of thing. But if you're going for those sheefish, they are sort of in these particular areas depending on the time of year.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Yeah. So you kind of search for them with a spoon and then switch to a fly rod. What kind of flies are you throwing?
For them, I like to use any of the big pike streamers. I started out using, like, on my first trip to the Kobuk, using sort of those same bunny leech kind of articulated streamers with the trailing hook, and that I would use for dollies, but it didn't work very well. I would get a strike and the fish would be on for a few seconds, and then the hook would come loose because the gap on the hook was kind of small. And so I really like those pike streamers that have a really robust, large hook. The sheefish are not leader shy; they're not shy of big hooks, so they'll whack it anyway, and that seems to sink better in their mouth, which is sort of like a bass mouth. So that bigger, wider hook does a
Huh.
better job. So
Yeah.
anything, well, I mean, pretty much any color, but you kind of go with the water conditions. So if it's kind of clear and good visibility, I like to go with darker colors, purple, black, olive. And then if it's sort of cloudy water, sometimes I'll go with something a little lighter, like a white color or brown that might stand out a bit differently.
Oh, interesting. All right. So the Kobuk, what's it? Give us an overview of what that river's like, kind of from top to bottom.
Yeah, so it flows out of Gates of the Arctic National Park, and it's like starts out as a sort of a small size river, super clear, lots of Arctic grayling in the upper reaches. Flows out of some lakes, so it's kind of moderated in flow a little bit. It does until you get lower down. It's not real flashy, up and down with water levels. Then it goes through this big rapid system right below the Walker Lake, which is where a lot of people fly in with float planes to start floating it. And a couple whitewater canyons, and then it kind of slows down, mellows out, and becomes this really large, wide river, almost along the lines of the Yukon, but clearer water, all the way down to the village of Kobuk, which is where I took out for the float trips that I've done. Down below that, it starts getting a little more silty. You can still fish for sheefish and pike down there, but it's a little harder to catch them, because they just can't see through the water as far, where it's all clear water upstream. It's pretty cool if you floated because you're starting in the mountains and then you see the evolution all the way down with this clear water small river to something that's quite big with big braided channels that people are taking jet boats up and stuff. So
Okay. You told me before the show it's a pretty low cost DIY trip. And why is it a good DIY trip, would you say?
the Kobuk is not the Dalton Highway is, and for the Dolly Varden, but the Kobuk is pretty expensive to get to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so if you're going to float, do the float and fly in thing, you're going to go in with probably out of Bettles, Alaska or Fairbanks, Alaska, and you're going to have to pay, several $1,000s for a charter flight for that.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah, once you get down to where the villages are, then you can take small commercial flights to and from those villages that are just a few $100s a piece. So you could fly into the village of Kobuk, which is the upstream most one, and then float down to the next village, and you could catch sheefish, and that would be much more economical. But you kind of miss out on the whitewater and the Brooks Range and the Clearwater section of it. So yeah, there's different ways you can do it. But the Kobuk is usually not cheap, but it's definitely worth the money. It's my favorite river in Alaska, and I'm trying to float all 25 of Alaska's wild and scenic rivers. I've done
Oh,
10. The Kobuk is by far my favorite so far.
why is it your favorite? What do you love about it?
The fishing, of course, but just the fact that it starts in the Brooks Range and it's really unique, flows out to northwest Alaska, and also there's not a lot of human presence along it. So, like I said, floating 7 days, 8 days without seeing anybody. And the sheefish, I mean, it's the best place in the world to catch sheefish, and I really value those fish. To me, they're sort of synonymous with wild places. So it's just my jam, I guess, that river.
It's your jam. It's your
Yeah.
jam. What kind of research are you doing up there?
Yeah, so the research we've been doing relates to something called the Ambler Road, which would be this industrial road that would cut across the Kobuk River and a bunch of other rivers in the Brooks Range there. And so what I've been studying is what levels of contaminants like mercury, zinc, cadmium are in the fish in the aquatic environments right now. In case something like those developments come in, we can then identify if there's changes, if there's things that need to be addressed, if there's some sort of
You got a
breach.
baseline then.
Exactly. Yeah. And so we're also looking at PFAS, which are a man-made chemical. They call them forever chemicals that were used in firefighting foam. So we were testing fish for those as well. And so there was the Kobuk River, the Alatna River, and the John River, these sort of more remote western Brooks Range rivers that we tested. And then we also tested a bunch of water bodies along the Dalton Highway, which is, there's been a road there in the Trans-Alaska Pipeline for about 40 years. So the idea was to get a baseline of both places and also compare between the two. And, maybe what's the conditions that are along that road could tell us what the Ambler Road might do to fit out in the other region. So, yeah, what we found, not too surprisingly, was that there was elevated levels of metals like mercury, zinc, and lead along the Dalton Highway. And there was one lake where fish, it was grayling, burbot, and whitefish had elevated levels of that PFAS. the forever chemicals that are used in firefighting foam. So that was, it was not too surprising to see that, except maybe the PFAS detections.
Yeah.
But even with that, it was elevated compared to the Western Brooks Range rivers, which were very low in all those contaminants. It was that most of the fish were still healthy to eat, even along the Dalton Highway and everything. There was just a
Yeah.
few that reached a level where, like for pregnant women and children, they might need to limit their meals based on the state of Alaska guidelines for mercury. So, we definitely saw the footprint of that road, the Dalton Highway, but things were still looking decent for that. Of course, maybe we'll talk more about the Ambler Road. It's slightly different than the Dalton, but we can save that till a little later on.
How busy is the Dalton Highway?
It's super busy. Yeah, there's basically anything that needs to go up to those Arctic oil fields is being trucked up and down that road. There's some things that can be taken in by cargo plane and whatnot, but there's all sorts of stuff going up there, like cabling, pipes, groceries, vehicles that they're taking up for them to work on things with, drill rig parts. So, yeah, I would say I'd be surprised if you went like 15 minutes without seeing a big truck go by any time of the day. It's 24 hours a day that traffic is happening.
That's quite a bit then. And tell me,
Yeah.
what's the story on the Ambler Road? Because I know we've just got some news. Was it last week that administration okayed it? Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So this road would be a 200-mile road that would come off the Dalton Highway, which already exists, and this road would cut out into western Alaska near the Kobuk country. And the idea was that some mining companies could then develop some open pit mines, and then they would truck the ore from those mines down that road back to the Dalton Highway, then down to Fairbanks, put it on the railroad, send it to Anchorage, and then ship it overseas for processing. So that's sort of the idea. There was an application put in for this road back in 2016. And then there's been this public comment and environmental impact process that's been going on since then. In 2024, there was a final decision published that basically said the road's not happening. The permits were denied. Then with the new federal administration that came in, there's obviously been a push for more resource extraction. So there's been efforts to try to overturn that denial of the permit for the Ambler Road. And just, I think last week there was an executive order or some sort of appeal order that basically permitted the road, which was kind of a surprise to folks. So,
yeah, how did it turn around? I mean, I thought it was not going to happen. Just the administration just said, let it go through, huh?
Yeah, I think a lot of people were confused because this has never been utilized before. There was this process where the applicant for the road could file an appeal to the denial that happened in 2024. So they did that. There was no public notice that appeal was filed. Nobody knew it had been filed. And then sort of out of the blue, that appeal was upheld, which then, reversed the decision to block the Ambler Road. So everybody was pretty surprised about that. And I mean, a lot of people, there's a diversity of opinion in Alaska. Let's say maybe 50% of people are for the road, 50% against. The for, obviously there's some economic benefits to the road coming in. And then obviously the against are people that are worried about the impacts to fish and wildlife and outdoor opportunities.
What do you think about the impact to the fish? What are you kind of expecting?
Yeah, I'm pretty worried because there's a different road that's in the same region called the Red Dog Mine Road there's studies that have shown that the ore trucking that they do that would be similar to the Ambler Road has caused contamination of the tundra with zinc and cadmium and lead out to a half kilometer away from that road. And this Ambler Road would cross over 3,000 streams, including many of those big rivers where the sheefish are spawning just downstream, and the salmon too. So all these places are areas where those contaminants would be getting into the water, traveling downstream, getting into the food web. And then, of course, if the mines were put in, there's a danger that there could be some catastrophic spill or failure, which has happened in Alaska and Canada in recent years. And so is that worth it, just upstream of the world's best sheefish river and many of its tributaries? I don't know.
Man.
For me as an angler, I would say no. If I was employed by the mining industry or something, maybe it would be the other way. So
yeah. So luckily we've got people like you who are putting the baseline down so we can have some proof about what impact it's having.
Yeah, I think that's going to be really important, is that we can at least tell what's there now and try to respond to anything that might happen if that road goes through. And it's not a done deal. So there's a bunch of native landowners that the mining companies have to strike deals with to finalize the road getting through. And there's been some arguments and stuff through there. So it's probably going to be, I would say, a couple of years till anything really gets constructed on the road. And so there's potential that it may not go through. So.
Do you feel like Alaska has a s- a good history of resource development like this, or what typically happens in Alaska when these mines come and go?
Yeah, some of the mines are really great for the community and everything, and we rely on those industries like oil and mining for a lot of our money in Alaska. Around Fairbanks, where I live, there's the Fort Knox gold mine and the Pogo gold mine, which have been running for decades, and they have had environmental breaches where they've had spills of like cyanide into the river, and we don't know what happened to the fish there, but they pay the fine, they correct things, but of course there's a lot of oversight for those mines because they're right next to communities. If there's mines way out in Northwest Alaska with very little oversight except themselves, maybe something different would be at play. So I'm not anti-mining or anything, and I certainly know the value of mining and oil and gas exploration in Alaska. But I think putting a road through Gates of the Arctic National Park and mines in right upstream of the Sheefish on the Kobuk is a pretty risky thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Is there anything that we can do as the angler community?
Just raising awareness. Yeah, like at this point, because that appeal was basically upheld, and so the permit was authorized. There's not so much that can happen except for a lot of litigation, I guess, at this point. But just keep aware of it if you're interested in this area or going she fishing. Keep it in, keep a tab on what's going on, and there's likely opportunity to at some point, send a message to your congressperson because these are federal lands. This
Right.
road would be crossing federal land, so it's any American has a say in what's happening on these lands. It's not just Alaskans, even though I often see like, if you're not Alaskan, you shouldn't have an opinion on this road, but these are the American public's land. So I highly encourage folks to talk to their congressional representatives and just talk to other anglers, get the word out about it if you can. And there may be opportunity in the near future to actually make an impact on it.
It's a foreign mine company that's coming in.
Yep. So it's called Trilogy Metals is who's kind of pushing the road, and so it's kind of jointly owned by Australian and Canadian companies. And it kind of feels weird when these foreign companies are coming in because I don't have a lot of trust that they won't just kind of bolt if something bad happens. And
Yeah.
a lot of the Canadian companies have had a poor track record. There was something called the Mount Holly disaster where an entire river got wiped out by a tailings dam failure. So, and that was a Canadian company that operated that. So I'm pretty worried about those sort of things happening. I wish it was more of a U.S. based company, and yeah, so we probably won't see too much economic benefit, if any, from these foreign mining companies coming in, and then this ore is being trucked all the way to Fairbanks and then put on the railroad to Anchorage and then shipped to East Asia or Canada to be
Really?
processed. So
Huh.
there can't be a lot of there can't be a lot of profit after all that happens. It's a long ways. It's like 400 miles by
Right.
road with this ore, which is really heavy, and then like another 400 miles by rail, and then hundreds or thousands of miles through the ocean to get to processing facilities. We don't have any for zinc and cobalt and these minerals that are going to be extracted from those mines in Alaska. So I don't know if the public's going to get a lot of benefit, and probably the construction companies, the mining companies will, but I don't see a lot of benefit and a lot of risk for the outdoors
Profits.
community.
Sounds like the profits are going elsewhere.
I'm not sure. It's pretty speculative. All that who knows if the mines will ever be advanced if the road goes in. So
Yeah. Okay. All right. Life in Kalispell. What was it like as a kid growing up in Montana?
yeah, it was great. So I lived there till I got through high school, and then I went up to Fairbanks for school after that. But my dad was a fish biologist there with Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, so I was always out looking at insects, catching fish, hiking around in the Bob Marshall Wilderness and Glacier Park, and it was a really nice upbringing. And Alaska felt like the next big step up. So, and Montana, like there's so many great fisheries and places there, but a lot has been studied there. In Alaska, we're still like learning basic information about fish like the sheefish. We have no idea what they do when they swim along the coast. So one of my projects is putting satellite tags on the sheefish and then seeing where those fish go and where the tag pops up from. So it's really exciting work up here, and I'm very
Yeah.
fortunate to have the upbringing I did that kind of set me up for it.
Yeah. 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 Sounds like your dad might have been an inspiration for you, huh?
For sure, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So with these satellite tags, how does that work?
Yeah, these are really cool. So they kind of look like a light bulb, about the same size of as a light bulb. And they started out using these on like tuna and sharks. really big fish that could take a sort of a heavy payload of a tag because they weigh a fair bit. And so it rides along on the fish for up to a year, collecting data about the temperature of the water the fish is going through, sort of its location through the light, like the photo period. You can figure out a way, like a track where it's gone, also the depth that it's diving. So you're getting a lot of cool information. At the end of the tag sort of deployment, it's triggered to pop up off the fish to the surface of the water, and then it transmits all the data to satellites, which, if everything goes well, I can download from my computer. So
What? That is wild.
it's really
That
cool.
is so wild. Yeah.
Yeah, so our study was the first one on like whitefish species, the sheefish. That's never been done on whitefish before, and so it's being miniaturized more now. There's a lot of studies in Alaska with Chinook salmon, steelhead, even crabs. They can put these on king crabs and then track them around. So super cool. They're very expensive to get these tags, like $4,000 a piece. So you always are like, I hope I put that tag on there. I hope I put that tag on there right. When you release the
$4,000 per tag.
Yeah.
How many tags did you put out there?
For the sheefish, we put out about 20 tags.
Okay, so not thousands, yeah.
Yeah, some of those we caught through the ice out near Kotzebue and then put the tags on, and then some we caught up the Kobuk River on a float trip. And they've been going to some cool places. Some anglers have picked them up, subsistence anglers that live out there in the country. They've caught some of our fish, and they can send in the tag to us for a reward, and then we can get a lot of great information off the tag. So it's been a really cool study. And I was kind of hoping one of our fish would swim over to Russia because there was a Dolly Varden study in the same area, and one of those dollies actually swam over to Russia, and the satellite tag popped up. But the sheefish are not that adventurous, unfortunately. Yeah.
Russians thought we're invading them somehow, probably.
Yeah.
Right? So when these tags pop up, you don't have to find the tag. It'll just start sending a signal.
Yeah. As long as it's got battery life and like a clear line of sight to the sky, it'll just start sending information, which is great when you think about these gigantic spaces that I'm trying to track fish in out of Northwest Alaska. There's no way, if you had like a radio tagged fish, you'd have to cover a huge amount of ground with an airplane, right? So it's nice that they kind of self-report like that.
Yeah. That's so what else have you learned about sheefish? I have trouble saying that.
One thing that we found that was really cool is that they can go into like really cold water under the sea ice. Some of the experts on these fish thought that they didn't have a tolerance for going into what we call sub-zero water. So it's like water that's under the sea ice. Because the sea ice is salty, the water actually goes to like negative 0.1 Celsius. So it's less than 32 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wow.
The thought was that sheefish would like freeze solid if they wouldn't be able to function if they were in water that cold. But we found through the tag information that they actually spend quite a bit of time in that cold water. And we also found that they can dive down to like 80 feet deep when we thought they were mostly near the surface when they were out near the ocean there. So some cool stuff like that, which has been awesome to sort of dig through. And we're kind of working on writing up that information now.
Oh, interesting. Okay. And something you told me a couple of weeks ago when we first talked is that these rivers in the Brooks Range, that they freeze solid in some cases.
That's right. Yeah. So those ones on the Arctic slope, they just freeze right to the bottom. So there's only a few areas in the fresh water where fish can even live during the winter. And so we have been snowmobiling out to some of these, we call them springs, where the fish, there's upwelling from groundwater that keeps the river from freezing solid. And there's like hundreds of grayling and Dolly Varden packed into a little room-sized pool, basically under the ice there. And they spend from November all the way to like the end of May in there. So this terribly long, cold winter, they're just locked under the ice. And we've been doing some studies up there because we found a big die-off of fish. We had a GPS collared wolverine that was running around up there, and it was spending a lot of time around this one river, and we found that it was digging out these dead fish. So our wolverine researcher dropped a GoPro down in there, and there was like 200 dead grayling under there. So we're like, okay, we need to study this and see what's going on. So we've been going back to that spring. Luckily, that big die-off hasn't happened again, but we've got some really great information about what goes on in there, and we think it was like low dissolved oxygen that caused those fish to perish the one year.
Sure. Huh. So do you get your marching orders from the research organization you're with? Like something will come on down from on high. This is what you're going to be doing for the next X number of years?
Not so much. So what I do is I basically come up with a topic that I'm interested in. So like the sheefish satellite tagging, I really wanted to see what they were doing along the coast. So I'm just writing up all these proposals to research things that I think are interesting or important. Another one we're looking at is something called rusting rivers, where permafrost is melting and causing rivers to turn bright orange, which is obviously pretty bad for fish. It's kind of like acid mine drainage. So that I wrote up a proposal to study grayling and see if they're picking up more contaminants or having troubles based on those seeps that come out of the Brooks Range. So
Yeah.
I'm pretty much, sort of acting as like a research faculty member where I go out and put in a funding proposal for something that I want to get done, but it needs to align with WCS priorities for sure, which is, basically looking after and monitoring these fish and aquatic environments in the Brooks Range
Yeah.
in Northwest Alaska.
How are they funded?
WCS themselves?
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the funding comes from basically the zoos and aquariums and then big private donors. So, every time
Okay.
somebody visits the zoo, they're paying an entry fee, and a lot of that money gets spread out to the global conservation program. But our office in Fairbanks is actually mostly, we chase our own grants, so we're not too reliant on the headquarters for money.
No kidding.
So I get like BLM, Fish and Wildlife Service, Park Service type grants to study these things.
I see. Very good. So you've got to write grants if you want to keep your
Yeah.
job and get paid, huh?
Exactly.
Okay. Which is why you have a PhD. So you get good at that stuff.
Yeah, I feel like I'm finally kind of hacking it a little bit. So I've been with WCS for 6 years now, and we've studied some really great things, really important stuff with the fish up north.
Huh. Best part of your job is what?
Getting paid to fly out to these areas and raft around, catch fish, and also like interfacing with the people out there, talking to them about what they're seeing and what their priorities are. That Rusting Rivers project with the grayling, basically a community came to us and said, we're worried about our grayling. We're not seeing as many in our subsistence catches. And we know that these rusty seeps are happening. Can you guys take a look at this? And so those local collaborations are really, I guess, rewarding. And it's good to know that people care about what you're looking at instead of, something like ivory tower, like esoteric. So.
Right. All right. So if somebody wanted to come to the Brooks Range and hit the Kobuk, what kind of tips can you give us as far as logistics and trip planning?
Yeah, well, like we talked about a little bit, the seasonal timing is really important if you want to go for sheefish. Definitely recommend going in August or September. That's when they're kind of further up in the river, more concentrated. And yeah, you're going to want to do it with a float trip because there's not a lot of guides or outfitters along the river itself. It used to be that you could fly into Kobuk Village and hire somebody with a boat to boat you upstream, and then you could just fish out of the boat, and that makes it pretty logistically easy, right? You kind of rely on the local folks to set you up. But yeah, it's for the float trips, which is honestly the best way to do it on the Kobuk and the Brooks Range. Usually you're looking a year ahead and you try to contact the flight service operators up there, like Brooks Range Aviation or Coyote Air, that are flying in these areas, and kind of book your flight in, figure out where you want to go. And then the fun starts for me. I love planning and making lists and that sort of thing. So all winter I'm plotting, how many miles am I going to do the first day, which, I'm marking on Onyx or Google Earth, like this looks like a really good slough I want to stop at and fish, or look for moose, look for ducks, whatever. So, it's, yeah. And there's one great outfit called Remote Waters that basically facilitates these float trips for you on the Kobuk. I don't know what the pricing is, but if you look up Remote Waters LLC, they got a Facebook page, and they do set up these trips for people on the Kobuk, but there's not a lot of outfits that do it. And that's kind of a good thing because then you're out there mostly by yourself. You're not going to have a lot of competition. If people just want to catch a sheefish, you can go catch them through the ice out in Kotzebue. There's actually a guy there that rents out snowmobiles and ice augers and that sort of thing. So in like March and April, you can go out there and catch them through the ice if you book through him. But he's usually booked out like a year in advance. So
wow,
there's a few options to do it, I guess, for the sheefish.
So do you hunt and fish on the same trip?
Yeah, the first Kobuk trip, which was a personal trip, obviously I'm not hunting on my work trips, but that one was a moose hunt, and we also shot some ducks and then caught a bunch of sheefish, grayling, chum salmon, and had a really exciting, almost had a moose out there. I had a tag where you have to get a 50-inch antlered moose, so that's quite a large moose out there. And we had camped near this slough one night along the Kobuk, and I was just calling with the moose cow call, which is a pretty simple call. And all of a sudden, this big bull came thrashing through the brush, and it was right near dark. And there was this big screen of willows in front of me, and I just couldn't see his antlers. I knew he was huge, but until I saw the antlers, I wasn't going to take the shot. And he was, I thought he was going to run through the brush and trample me. He was just like 20, 30 yards away, making all this noise, grunting, snorting, thrashing around. it was super exciting, but it was just a little too dark to make a good judgment about if it was a legal animal. So I didn't end up shooting that animal. But yeah, that was kind of an incredible thing there. And my
Man.
companion on that trip was also looking to shoot a grizzly bear, which you can along that river. We never
Wow.
found one that was big enough for him. We saw plenty of them, but yeah.
And all that meat could fit in your float boat, in your raft?
Yeah, it depends on your raft, but I had this Pro Pioneer, which is sort of billed as it can take 2 people and a moose. So
That's the ad for it, huh?
yeah.
What kind of a sidearm do you carry? What do you recommend?
I have like it's called the Judge, which is not a good bear gun. So it's like it shoots 45 long Colt, but it also shoots 410 shells, which I like because then you can bring those. And like if you're out hunting on the tundra, you don't want to lug a shotgun around and your rifle, but you can have that. If you find a ptarmigan or some small game, a grouse, you can then use those 410 shells to shoot it. The 45 long Colt would be okay for black bear protection, I guess, but not so much grizzly bear. Maybe the small Brooks Range bears would be all right. So I do carry like they call them like Defender rounds for the 410, which is usually like copper discs and buckshot and that sort of thing. And then I mostly just rely on having that bear spray.
Huh. What kind of a rifle do you like for hunting moose and bears?
I have been using a 7mm 08, which is a little light for the moose and bears, but I have harvested both with that one with no problems. And then I just got a 308 Tika lightweight rifle with and I got a suppressor on there too, which is really great for saving the hearing. So those are the 2 rifles I use at the moment.
You say a 7mm was your first one?
7mm 08. So it's kind of a specialty cartridge.
Is that right?
Yeah. It's I think they're like 150 grain bullets, so they're great for deer, caribou, black bear, but maybe a little light for definitely a little light for moose and large grizzly bears. But as long as your shot placement is good, they can work. So.
What did that grizzly bear taste like that you harvested a few years ago?
Not very good. Yeah. So you're not required to take the meat on that. You have to take the hide and the skull, but on the grizzlies, you don't have to take the meat because oftentimes they're eating salmon. And so that's another reason why I don't harvest many grizzly bears is just I've only harvested one because you don't really eat them. I'm not much of a trophy hunter, so I'd rather, have something that can be a trophy and also be eaten. But that grizzly I got was on a salmon spawning stream. So it had just been chowing down on rotting salmon and, I kept a few steaks on it. Oh man, it tasted bad. So
really, they just flat out bad, huh?
They just smell nasty when they're eating the salmon, even the meat. But people do like what they call berry bears, which are grizzlies that basically never eat fish. They're out in interior Alaska just eating berries, ground squirrels, more plants, roots, and they can taste pretty good. I went to there was like a wild game dinner that the Wildlife Society puts on at the university in Fairbanks, and they had like pulled pork grizzly bear pulled pork style, which is actually pretty good. So
pulled pork, like barbecued pulled pork sandwiches
like
on a bun,
kind of slow cooked. Yeah, it's like
really?
crock potted sort of. So.
Crock pot. How about a caribou? What's caribou taste like?
Really good, and I've harvested a lot of them up in the Brooks Range. They're my favorite animal to go after. They're really lean meat, as long as you don't get like a really large bull that's in the rut. Sometimes they're what we call gamey, so they taste pretty strong. But luckily, I've never harvested one that tasted like that. They are just similar to deer in their taste. People don't rate them as highly as moose, which I find more like beef. A little more fatty and maybe a little more mild. But I really like the caribou.
Huh? What about a Dall sheep?
I've never been successful, even though I've tried going after them a lot. But
have you really?
Yeah, it's the toughest hunt in Alaska, and so you have about like 15 days of the open season, and you have to find a ram that has a full curl, 360-degree curl to harvest, which is very difficult. And unfortunately, the populations aren't doing as good in Alaska now. So like the entire western Brooks Range has been closed to Dall sheep hunting for the last couple of years. So
really,
I wish I would have tried harder like 10 years ago when it was a little easier. But yeah.
Do they have stone sheep up there?
They do over in Canada, and then they do interbreed a little bit, I believe. And so there's what's called Bannon sheep, which they're sort of piebald. They might have a little brown, little white, and people have harvested those near the border within Alaska, kind of closer to Canada there. So, but yeah, it's those Dall sheep, and then we have mountain goats, more down towards the coast. But the Dall sheep are all the way up in the Brooks Range, which is super cool. They can survive up there.
What about a musk ox?
I see a lot of them, but it's all draw hunting tags. So, it's pretty low odds to get those. But I put in for the lottery every year to try to get one.
Do you get one? You want one, huh?
I do, because on the Dalton Highway, you see them along the road all the time. So they give out 4 permits per year, and like 10,000 people
4.
put in for that.
That's it?
So
4?
yeah, for that particular
What?
area, yeah.
Are they super rare up there? But you see them all the time, you said.
Yeah, I see them all the time, and I think maybe it's just that they always hang out near the river, which the road travels along, the Sagavanirktok River. So they're kind of concentrated in those river valleys. So you see more of them than it seems like there's more of them than there are. But they sort of were extirpated from Alaska and then reintroduced in the 70s, and now they're just
Oh,
building up to a good population where there's more and more hunting. So it used to be that Dalton Highway area was actually there was no harvest, and then I think 2 years ago it opened up to 4 tag. So they're sort of slowly opening it as those populations build.
yeah. How are the mosquitoes?
Go in August and September, and you don't have to worry about them too much. There's a lot of like the little no-see-ums and stuff, but the Arctic slope and the Brooks Range there can be the worst place in the world for mosquitoes. If
Really?
you go like right around the 4th of July, you have to have head netting and protective netting to be comfortable out there. So
Huh. Millions and millions of them, huh?
yeah, we call it the mosquito symphony. You can just hear them buzzing outside of your head net all day and outside your tent all night.
Oh my gosh. I think I'd go crazy. But you've
Yeah.
got no-see-ums, though. You don't have mosquitoes, but no-see-ums in August and September.
Yeah, very few mosquitoes. Like once it starts getting chilly, they kind of drop off, and then the no-see-ums can be a little bad on a hot day. But if it's pretty cool, you really don't have to worry about the bugs much. Sometimes I don't even put on repellent. If it's kind of a warm day, those no-see-ums and black flies will go ahead and get after you a little bit. I might put on a bit of bug spray, but it's not as bad
Yeah.
as the head net times in the like right around 4th of July.
Yeah. Do you send your assistant out there on the July trips, and you take the August trips?
That's a good idea. I should start, directing things from the office more. But man, I just
Yeah.
love getting out there. Even if there's mosquitoes, I'm going to go for it.
Really?
So
Listen to that, man. That's awesome. All right. So what we're talking about the different kind of game you can eat up there, but what do you take for food on these trips? What do you like? What's your shore lunch?
yeah, well, oftentimes it's something really boring. A lot of those freeze dried meals. But for the Kobuk River trips, where we're flying in with a big airplane, usually a Beaver, you have a pretty good payload. So it's usually like bacon the first couple mornings, maybe
Ooh.
steak the first night, and then once you find the sheefish, of course, that's what you want to eat. But yeah, maybe for like a quick shore lunch, fry up a couple grayling caught fresh and
Okay.
bacon with juice, and then a couple shots of whiskey or a beer if you have those along.
Okay. So you like to have fun on these trips. Do you have to be in good shape to do one of these trips? Kind of sounds like you do.
The float trips, no. So like the Kobuk, where you're just in the raft the whole time, that you don't have to be necessarily in good shape, but you do need to be an experienced, basically oarsman on the river. You know how to read the water and make sure you don't get into trouble with the white water if you're floating one of those sections. But we were talking earlier about like the pack raft trips I do, where you hike 60 miles in and then float 80 miles out. You definitely need to do some prep for that. Some not just coming right off the couch, but
Yeah.
uh, doing some practice, to lead up to the trips like that.
I don't suppose there's these nice trail markers either that you follow.
No, there's no trails up there other than what the caribou and the moose make. So up in that Arctic slope area,
Really?
and you probably heard about how difficult it is to walk across those tundra tussocks. It's like trying to walk on giant mushrooms. They just topple you over, and you twist your ankle and stuff. So I found the best way to travel up there is to actually follow the river courses, and there's usually like a game trail sort of along the gravel bars, and you don't have to do too much of the tundra travel. But
Really?
that can be so terrible. It looks great. It looks like this beautiful grassy field that you can just romp across, like Little House on the Prairie, and then you start walking through it, and you're in mud up to your shins, and you're toppling off of these grass clumps. So
Oh my gosh.
yeah,
All right.
planning the route and staying like the more you can float, the better too, right? You don't have to walk all over that stuff. So there's some challenge.
So not for the faint of heart, folks, but fun to dream about. Maybe when I was 30 years younger, I might have done something like this. Actually, I've got a picture in my bathroom of my grandfather in the 1950s, and he was overweight, and he's holding a Dall sheep. And I
Heck
always
yeah.
thought, well, if he could get one, it can't be that hard. But everybody I talked to about going Dall sheep hunting is like, man, it's a ball buster. I don't know how my grandfather got one. There must have been a lot more of them back in the 1950s.
Yeah, I think there was. There was even like they were shooting them for meat for the crews that were building roads and stuff. There were so many of them, and they just
Really?
would wander up for the day and blast a few. So now it's, besides the regulations, but there's so much competition and you only have 15 days of the season, right? So everybody's out there.
Oh.
You're competing with everybody, and there's fewer and fewer areas to go too. So you kind of got to be the fastest and most knowledgeable and strongest to get to one. So I'm sure
The
it was easier
fastest
back
guy
then.
wins, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just trying to picture you carrying a pack raft and multiple days worth of food, hiking 60 miles with all that. How much did that pack weigh?
That was probably, 70, 80 pounds. So it was slow going, But luckily I didn't have to cross a lot of those tussocks. I was walking mostly on like nice gravel river bars and stuff. There was maybe
But you
like
didn't know
5.
that, did you? Did you know that when you were getting ready?
I did, yeah, because I'd been in this area before.
Okay.
So
All
I
right.
knew I'd have a pretty good go of it for some parts. But I can send you a picture of how loaded down I was with all that
Yeah,
stuff.
I'd like
I
to see
took
that.
a selfie at the start.
Yeah.
But yeah, I looked probably looked like some gargantuan monster marching across the tundra there with that giant pack.
But you were determined because it sounded like an awesome trip. You had to get
Yeah,
up. You know,
yeah.
when you're determined, man, you'll do a lot when you really got that get up and go motivation.
That's right. And I don't have the coin to, I'd much rather fly in and then just float the whole way down, right? But I don't have like $6,000 to do that every year. So I was very
Wow.
determined to just do the 60-mile hike into the Ivashak. A lot of people will fly into the headwaters there and then float it
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, 60
Yeah.
miles. Jeez. Wow. Okay. Well, you must have a very understanding wife, and I understand you've got a baby on the way.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's coming any day now, probably. So
Woo.
there'll be more curtailment to my long, lengthy trips, but maybe that's for the best. I can maybe
I think so.
strategize a little more and spend more time at home, and then just focus on a fewer high quality trips. So,
You have to come up with more excuses as to why you have to go.
well, good thing is for work, I always am out flying and doing somewhere, and I can write my own grants. So I can be like, sorry, I got to go for work. So.
There you go. There you go. Oh man, Kevin, thanks for doing this. Great job.
Yeah, thanks so much, Steve, and thanks for covering a little bit about the Ambler Road and letting me talk about this stuff. And
Yeah,
love your podcast, and hope people are interested in all that we talked about today.
I bet they will be. How can people get in touch with you?
They can find me with the Wildlife Conservation Society Fisheries website that I have. Maybe I'll just provide that link because it's a bit of a mouthful.
Okay.
And yeah, otherwise, a cool follow for some of these northern fish is the Midnight Sun Flycasters on Facebook. It's like a Northern Alaska fly fishing club that I'm part of the leadership for. And so we do a lot of posts about information about sheefish, Dolly Varden, different things in interior Alaska.
Good.
If you are interested in going up there and fishing, there's a lot of great free information on there.
That's super cool. All right. Well, wish you extraordinary success and all your adventures to follow. And thank you, folks, for listening to another episode of The Destination Angler. Be sure to check out my Facebook and Instagram pages and my website. Kevin's got a bunch of really cool pictures of the area that I'm sure you'll be interested in seeing. So check that out. And you can always DM me or email me with comments and suggestions at shaig@destinationanglerpodcast.com. If you like the show, please share it with a buddy. As always, our music is by our Brothers Fountain, a great little band out of Colorado. Hope you enjoyed the show, and we will see you again soon. Tight lines, everybody.
Well, I'll go from the land to the shining sea. But I know there's more to life than what the eye can see.